Is a senior researcher with the Institute of Security Studies. We chat to him now from our Pretoria studios. Good afternoon, Doctor, and thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon to the viewers.
Doc, Prime Minister Desalegn trying very hard to defend his country's human rights record. Not an easy task, though, in the face of serious human rights violations, the clampdown on the media, the jailing of journalists and bloggers we saw recently in Ethiopia.
No, definitely neither for him nor for Barack Obama, because Obama wanted to refine African and U.S. relationship centered around investment, but also good governance. And Ethiopia was seen as an exception to the 4 trips that Obama has already undertaken on the African continent, where he really insisted on the consolidation of institutions, the respect of human rights, to allow the economic gains, because Africa is seen as a land of prospective economic growth to benefit the majority of its citizens. So I think it will be very hard for the Ethiopian Prime Minister to sell Ethiopian record in terms of respect of human rights and civilian rights to the president, to the U.S. President, who will not miss the opportunity to remind Addis Ababa of its obligation really to give a meaning to human rights and democratization.
South Sudan, of course, to feature highly here now. How likely is it that Obama will go the route of calling for tougher sanctions, possible arms embargo, if the warring factions in South Sudan do not clinch a peace deal soon enough?
No, I think it's very important. I think that will be one of the key subjects of discussion between Ethiopia and Washington, probably, to have the view from Addis Ababa on the behavior of the key protagonists in the South Sudan crisis. And here again, I think the U.S. will weigh heavily on the process that will lead to the imposition of sanctions, which ultimately will really amend the behavior and the commitment of actors to give a chance to peace in South Sudan.
Some concern now from some quarters, of course, that Obama's trip could lend credibility to a government accused of human rights violations, as you mentioned before. Amnesty International just saying earlier today that they don't want this visit to be used to sanitize an administration that's been known to violate human rights, unquote. Do they have a point, Doc?
Definitely. I think this perception is already widely spread because many activists actually question why Ethiopia was chosen. But the logic behind Washington's move to visit Addis Ababa is completely different. I said earlier that Washington wants to forge a new kind of partnership with Africa. At the center of that partnership is economic opportunities, both for the U.S. and for Africa. And whenever that is possible, to mobilize the civil, private sector to invest in any country, or to really showcase economic opportunities for the U.S. businessmen, I think the U.S. leader, Barack Obama, has shown the way, given the speed that he delivered in Nairobi and what he's aiming at achieving also in Addis Ababa. But I think that will remain the question in his approach to governance in Africa. Why Addis Ababa? But those contradictions are useful. Sometimes are also familiar in foreign policy of a big country like the United States of America, who sometimes can simply ignore democracy and human rights when issues of regional security or security pertaining to the U.S. security actually come to the fore.
Doctor, very quickly, to what extent does this trip to Ethiopia present an opportunity to leverage support against Al-Shabaab for the U.S. And to somewhat recalibrate relations between the U.S. and African nations like Kenya and Ethiopia at this juncture, keeping in mind the threat of terror hanging over both nations?
Look, I think Kenya and Ethiopia were chosen exactly for that purpose because of the role that Kenya is playing against Al-Shabaab and also the leadership that Ethiopia has shown, definitely in terms of ensuring regional security. So the consolidation of that relationship will come from the strategy of the refining of the strategy that has already been put in place for the regional actors in partnership with the U.S. to come to terms with Al-Shabaab that has become more than a regional security threat, to global security threat, because every terrorist group is looking at Al-Shabaab, inspired by their exactions, to cause havoc in the country as far as Nigeria. So I think that will feature prominently in the discussions, but following the discussion will be what concretely will be put in place to help that region to get rid of those organizations, those terrorist organizations that are really jeopardizing the state's survival, the national security, as well as the security of a citizen.
Dr. David Zoumeni, Senior Researcher with the Institute of Security Studies. It has indeed been a pleasure chatting to you on the PM News Desk. Moving on to